Foreshadow. Yeah.
Testing 1 2 1 2. Hello. How are we doing tonight? We're doing good. We're going to go ahead and get started here. We have a very exciting meeting tonight. I see people walking out there. I'm like, hey, come on in. We have a very important meeting tonight that it is going to give you a lot of information, a lot of insight to not only what's going on as far as our political climate, but also to understanding that we have some choices to make coming up this fall. And ahead of that, we want to make sure that we are giving some education. Kevin's calling you, or Kelvin's calling you. Want to be able to give education to our members, our friends of our members, and making sure that you have information that will, go with you beyond tonight. We have a candidate forum that's coming up in October, so this is really the precursor to that candidate forum because we're going to have candidates there, and we want to hear their perspective and what they're actually going to do for our community. And this is where we learn about those positions. And then additionally, we have a special guests here from SCAR, and we really want to talk about what's going on with the future of our civil rights. Let's really talk about what happened in our own backyard with the Spokane 3 and with the protests, and getting a direct understanding from someone who actually was impacted by that. So I think tonight's going to be a wealth of information, dialogue, and I'm not going to waste too much time fumbling over the mic. I'm going to turn it over to our chair of our civic engagement, Mr. Eddie Everhart.
Well, good evening, everyone. All right, thank you. A little participation. So tonight, she already kind of expressed what she wanted to say as far as who we have here, but we have the county auditor, we have Ms. Linnell Holt, and they're going to give us a little bit of information about voting. All right. I'm a little nervous right now because I don't normally do this, but don't let me start walking, okay? Because I like to walk and talk. So will you please give me a warm welcome for Ms. Linnell Holt and Ms. Vicky Dalton.
He's nervous because he doesn't know what I'm going to say. So, but the thing that I'm going to say is that I brought the person who knows more about being a county auditor and voting and elections with me. So she's going to start out the program, but I really am hoping that this is a very informal chat amongst yourselves, but not while we're talking, to kind of create the kind of atmosphere where you'll feel comfortable knowing and learning what it is that you want to learn. So there'll be a little bit of learning stuff, and then there'll be an opportunity for you to think about what it is that you want to do. I've first met Vicky, we were children, and And we grew up in the county government system, and I'm delighted that she has been our auditor for so long. And I know that as a health issue, she really does need to retire because it is a job that is absolutely huge. And she is one of the most conscientious people you will ever meet, does kind things as the auditor. Like you can call her and say, hey, Vicky, I need to know. So that's who you're getting tonight, is a real human being who really understands the importance of making sure that our democracy stays our democracy. So I'm going to give it to Vicky, and then she's going to address some questions that some of you presented earlier. So she's weaving that into her talk as we go, and I really appreciate that that she's already thought about how she's going to incorporate those. So go.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So many of you already know me. I'm Vicky Dalton. I am the Spokane County Auditor and have been that for almost 28 years. So yeah, in another 6.5 months, I will no longer say I am the county auditor. I can go back to saying I'm a weaver. So looking forward to that. But before we start on elections, I just want to tell you a little bit about the county auditor's office in the big picture. What I like to say is the county auditor's office is responsible for your most valuable assets. So one of my offices is recording, where we record deeds and liens. We also issue marriage licenses. Another one of my offices is motor vehicle licensing, where we title cars, issue tabs, and we'd like to see more people renewing their tabs right now. That would be great. I've also got financial services, which tracks how the county actually spends the money. Remember, budget that everybody talks about is the authority to expend. It's the dream. My office tracks what really happens, which is sometimes very different than the budget. And then finally, we have elections, which of course is how the public, the members of our society, determine who the leadership is. So think about what my office does. We have the deed to your home, probably your single largest asset for those of you who are homeowners. We have the title to your car, which may be your next highest asset. We have your ballot, which is your voice in democracy. We have your money. How is your taxpayer dollars being spent? And the one I always save for last, because after many years of selling them, I finally got around to using one, and that is we have your marriage certificate. So hopefully you value your spouse the highest among all those things. So 5 assets in your life, that is the responsibility of the county auditor to maintain that documentation. So this is not just some clerical office. This is about history. This is about your ability to express your opinion and to ensure that your choice is handled properly and fairly. So that's why the county auditor's office is important. So now we'll get down to elections. Unless somebody has a quick question about one of those other functions.
I think this mic is a little bit louder.
Okay.
And your soft voice.
It's just because it's the end of the day and I'm really tired. Okay. Well, if that's the case, then I don't have to stand behind the podium. Woohoo! Okay.
Hello, there we go.
Okay. Now we can hear. Yeah, if you got me in the morning, I'm usually pretty loud, but by the end of the day, after I've been on too many webinars, it gets a little quiet. Okay, so does anybody have a question about one of my other functions besides elections?
As the auditor over the finances, does your office also audit at the end of the year, or do you engage the auditor that comes in to look at what I think of as a corporate kind of auditing function?
So the question is to what level do we audit, and to what level are we engaged with the external auditor that comes in, like an audit of a company? So the state auditor's office in the state of Washington is responsible for performing the audits of all the local governments and state agencies unless they contract out with a firm that specializes in a very niche kind of operation. So Washington State, I believe now, is the only state where a state agency audits everybody. Otherwise, it's CPA firms that do the audits. So yes, we are the ones who interact with the state auditor, and then throughout the year, we're the ones that audit the vouchers that come in. So departments make their purchases, they put it all together, they send it to us, and we ensure that the invoice matches, it's the same vendor. So do we determine that it's a wise expenditure? No. That's up for the Board of County Commissioners to look at what actually happens and decide if departments have been good stewards of the money or not. But does everything match? Is the right tax being paid? Is everything supported? Has it been authorized? That is what we do in financial services. And we prepare that end of the year financial statement, which is about 350 pages. Yeah, it takes a lot of effort. So that is one of our major functions.
For those who are probably unfamiliar with what the auditor does, and going into this new election cycle, what's something that we should look for in a candidate? Are you able to speak towards that, or what are things that make a good auditor?
Well, the auditor's office is a pretty large operation. So this past year, or I should say 2026, we're going to come in at about a $6 million operation. Right now, we have 38 positions. After the budget cuts, we're going to have a few less. So you really need somebody who can manage an office, who understands budgets, who understands how government works, what budget cuts are like, and also what the responsibility is to comply with the laws. Local governments, especially counties, unlike cities that can write their own charters, this county, Spokane County, is a creature of the state. We have to follow the state laws. So you really need somebody who understands how to follow the laws of the state of Washington. You can have all the brilliant ideas you want, but you don't have the discretion to do anything you want. You must follow the laws as they exist in our CW, Revised Code of Washington, and the WAC, the Washington Administrative Code. So you can't just do what you want. And there are laws I hate. There are things we do on a daily basis. I just want to beat my head against the wall. But I have taken the oath. My responsibility is to perform that law whether I agree with it or not. And that sometimes is a really tough thing to do. So that's a couple of the things that I would say to look for in an auditor. Are you going to have somebody like me who's a CPA who actually gets it and understands it, who works in the office beforehand and who really understood it all, not just the financial side, but all of the operation of the county, not just the auditor's office, because I had a job that I got to work across the entire county. You might get a few bits and pieces of that, but you're not going to get me. So just put that aside and be looking at what's standing in front of you. And is that enough package to actually handle the office, to handle the internal organizational politics, to handle the pressures that are going to come at you from all those very interesting special interest groups that really don't like you. And in some cases, they don't think you're even human. It's tough and it's wearing, and you have to deal with it. And someone who can handle having the microphone shoved in your face, and you've got to be able to handle that. And for those of you who have lived this, you know that is a very difficult skill to develop and to get through. And lastly, really, really thick skin. Yeah. Don't ever let them see you cry. Except when I talk about December 6th, 2012, when we issued the first same-gender marriage license. I cry at that one almost every time. So, and for those of you who don't know, I actually forced Department of Health to get that form in place on December 6th of 2012, because I was chair of the recording committee marriage licenses for the county auditors. That's a story for another time. So anyway, let's get down to elections then. So great questions. Thank you. So Linnell, do you want to throw those questions at me that we had? Oh, okay. Okay. So I'm going to run through elections really fast because nobody told me exactly how much time I have, and I warned you I can go for 2 hours. Okay. I can do it in about 12. I can do it about 12 more minutes. Yeah, let's see if we can do this. Okay, so we are a vote by mail state in the state of Washington. We used to be poll sites. I don't have time to tell you those stories because it's not all good. Going to vote by mail gives us the ability to actually administer the election with more efficiency, more effectiveness, greater control, greater security, and greater integrity. It allows us to maintain the voter registration rolls much more frequently because we send out so many pieces of mail every year to every voter. We get that information back every time from the Postal Service if somebody has moved. When you're in a poll site operation, you may only mail once every 2 years. So we have contact frequently throughout the year in a poll site state. Sometimes the best they do is once every 2 years. And there are some locations in this county where between a quarter and a third of the people move every single year. We have folks who couch surf. They're only someplace for 3 months at a time. So just trying to track voters can be really a huge, huge task. So that's something that's very important to maintain the voter rolls. It's just that frequent contact with the voters. And unless you're in voter administration or elections administration, you may not know that. That is very key. Because we're a vote by mail state, we have that frequent contact and feedback about our voters, and we can keep our voter registration rolls much more current than other states can. So some of the other things we face in voter registration is just verifying the identity of the voter. Well, currently, we are collecting the last 4 digits of the Social Security number. And if you don't have a Social Security, we collect the driver's license number, Washington State driver's license number. And if you don't have that, then we collect the last 4 digits. So we verify your identity when you register against either the driver's license database, and if we don't have that, then we verify it against the Social Security database. Now, keep in mind that the Social Security database is not a citizenship roll. That is not a list of citizens. Anybody who works in the US is supposed to have a Social Security number so you pay your taxes, because that's what Social Security numbers are about. It's about taxes. It's not about voting. But it helps us to verify the identity of that voter. So we do verify the identity. State of Washington is a little different. There's only, I think, 5 states that do true enhanced driver's licenses, which is citizenship verification. And I can't remember the exact percentage, but I think about 1/3 of all driver's licenses now are enhanced driver's licenses. So think about that. Washington State, vote by mail. 1/3 of our driver's licenses are already citizen verified. Okay? I can tell you it's not the red states. So Washington State is unusual. The other thing we do is we have a process where voters can update your information online. Again, people move. You can go online, votewa.gov, and update your mailing address and your residence address. Pretty easy. So let's talk about ballots. In the state of Washington, basically, our role as elections administrators are to ensure that every qualified voter has the opportunity to register to vote, to get a ballot, to mark that ballot, to return the ballot, and then to have their vote counted intended it to be counted and to count it accurately. So once you're registered, we're going to send ballots out to every active voter on our rolls. So you're going to get a ballot in the mail. If for some reason you've moved and you haven't told us you've moved, you can call us and you can get a replacement ballot. So we verified who you are. We're sending the ballot out to you. Then when the ballot comes back, either through the US mail, maybe that'll continue and maybe it won't, or through one of our drop boxes, we check the signature against what's from the envelope to what's in your record. Every single one. So in a presidential election, if we get 320,000 envelopes back, we check 320,000 signatures. Humans compare those signatures, and they're really pretty darn good at catching that mom signed somebody's name. It happens. So those replacements, if we do send one to you, or even 2 replacements, those are tracked. Those are separately numbered in that barcode that's on your envelope. So if we have sent you the original and a replacement, and you send both of them back, we're only going to count 1. Because we know you've sent back 2, we're going to count 1, and you're going to get a nasty letter from the prosecuting attorney. Yeah, because you're only allowed to cast 1 ballot. And yeah, we can catch that. So when the ballot envelopes come back in, the return envelopes come back in, we scan the barcode, we scan the signature, and then a human compares that. If the signature does not match, then it's looked at by 2 different sets of people before it's finally determined it doesn't match. And then we create the list of challenge signatures and immediately send out a letter. If we have your email, we're going to send you an email and let you know that your signature's been challenged and what's the process to cure. And as was asked, what about the reconciliation process for that? Once that return envelope comes into our hands and goes through that great big scanning machine we have, the envelope sorter, we are tracking every one of those envelopes. And then after we open the envelope, every one of those ballots is treated like a $100 bill. It's inventory. We're tracking it. We know what we have on hand. We know what's in the trays. We know how many envelopes we have. We know how many ballots we have. We know how many envelopes we've accepted the signatures on. We know how many we haven't. So we are like a great big bank vault that keeps track of the deposits every step of the way. And quite frankly, banks would probably be thrilled to have our error rate, which is almost 0. Yeah. So, and this is all 39 counties. We all do it pretty much the same way. So speaking for the state of Washington, it's a pretty tight, slick operation. So thank you, good question. And yes, we do reconcile at the end, where after we've tabulated ballots, we actually know how many we should have counted. We have how many we did. We know exactly which batch might have a problem. We can go back and actually go through that batch and figure out what has happened. The older tabulators we had, it was pretty easy for an employee to goof and pick up 2 ballots instead of 1 to run it back through because the machine hadn't read one of them. So sometimes we would have a miscount where it had counted a ballot twice, and that comes up in our numbers. So that batch would be pulled aside, we would clear it out, and we would rerun that batch again. So if we were supposed to have 200 ballots in there, and it came up at 201, that batch got pulled aside, those numbers got deleted, and the batch got run again. And so at that point, it would come up with 200, because then they weren't distracted. So yeah, humans are humans. Occasionally we do make mistakes, but we have processes in place to catch those mistakes and correct those mistakes. So it's, again, it's a pretty slick operation. One thing I do want to stress is your vote is secret. Once we take that ballot out of the return envelope, your name's on the return envelope, it goes this direction, the ballot goes that direction. So your vote is secret. And that also is one of the reasons I do not stream the main operation. because you could do freeze frames and catch the name on an envelope and a ballot where someone didn't put it in the secrecy envelope, because it does happen where people don't use that secrecy envelope. How do we ensure that the tabulation is accurate? We do audits. We do audits during the election, and then we do have post-election audits also. And some of those are done within the county level, and then some of these tests are actually done statewide, where it's a statistical sample. So we may pull 5 ballots, King County may pull 17, Walla Walla may pull 2, but it's a statistical sample to make sure that all the ballots have been tabulated properly, and one race is selected to make sure. So what are some of the concerns? Oh, recounts. And if you want real fun, go onto our website, SpokaneCounty.gov, go to elections, go to, I think it's called archives, and then go to recount. And you'll see back in the bad old days, when we were first beginning, we did have some differences on the recounts. But now, when you look at the last 10 plus years, when we do a recount, whether it's a machine recount or a hand recount, we're coming out with exactly the same number. So our processes are very, very accurate. Again, I think banks would love to have our error rate, because we are really, across the state, are very good. So what are some of the concerns that are expressed? Yeah, your ballot on the outgoing mail could get intercepted by somebody else. You move, you don't tell us. The person now living in your apartment thinks they're going to be funny. They fill it out. They scribble something on the envelope. They send it back in. Ha, ha, ha. They don't check that. Ha, we check that. And that's going to be a question signature. And we're going to send in a letter. And it's still going to be the wrong voter. It's still going to come back wrong. So we're not going to count it. So coerced votes is another one that gets thrown at me all the time. Yeah, that's a possibility, but that's been an issue no matter how people have voted. And I would counter that by saying, you know what? What we're seeing now is that families sit down at the kitchen table and they talk to each other. They open up that voter's pamphlet and they have a discussion. So when people say, oh, you know, I used to go with my mom and we'd go into the little booth and, you know, she'd vote and the little old ladies would hand me a cookie. And what did you learn about making a decision? Nothing. Now, I hope you all sit at the kitchen table with your children, with your grandchildren, and you talk through why you're making the decision you're making. Unless, of course, one of you is of one bent and one is the other, and you just really can't talk to each other while you're casting your ballot. That's okay. But hopefully you can talk to each other. So how to get some information. There's information online. If you go to vowa.gov, put your name in, put your identification in, it's going to pull up a personalized voter's pamphlet for you with your races, with the candidates, with the issues, and you can do your research there. We also mail the voter's pamphlet to every household. So every single household should get that printed voter's pamphlet. Not only does it have information on the races and the candidates, but it also has information about how to register to vote, which is why we send it to every household, not just to registered voters. So we want to make sure that every person who is qualified to register has that opportunity and they have that information in their hand. So about 2 more minutes and I will go through what we're facing right now. We are facing a situation that is unlike anything that has ever occurred. And I'm sure you're going to hear more about that later tonight in a slightly different direction, but it's still the same thing. And it really is about the attempt to make it difficult for people to participate in democracy. In my case, it's about being able to get a ballot out to you. It's about getting a ballot back to us. And that is what's being done with the U.S. Postal Service and the executive directive signed by the president that would require that the U.S. Postal Service only deliver mail to people that are on the official citizenship list. There is no such list. And then they could only deliver ballots back to us for people who are on that citizenship list. And there is no such list. And whatever list is created will be inaccurate. It will be incomplete. Elections administrators have talked with the federal administrations for the past several decades about trying to create this kind of a list so that we can check our voter registration rolls against. If it had been possible to build this, if the federal government could have built this, it would have been built. It's not possible because the information that exists is so incomplete and is so inaccurate. The only two lists that are available for citizenship, naturalization and passports. And I'm not going to ask for a raise of hands, but I'll make you a bet that in a fully statistical representation, only 40% of the people who are actually citizens would be able to raise their hand and say, I have a passport. Yeah. Social Security list, again, is not a citizenship list. It is a taxpayer list. So if the federal government could create a citizenship list, great, but it needs to be 100% accurate. And they cannot do it, and it will take years to bring that together.
So sometimes I lose my ballot, and if this list is inaccurate, can't someone just go online, because I've been printing my ballot again online and send it that way? Is that a workaround to not mail the ballot if you're not on the list?
So we are coming up with all sorts of fun and interesting ways to help our voters get their ballot and get it back. What was just described is I can go online into votewa.gov, pull myself up, print my ballot, and you cannot mail it back. You would have to go to the drop box and put it in the drop box. So there's workarounds. We are Washington State. We make things happen. All 39 counties and the Secretary of State's office, and no matter what political party we may belong to. We're here for the voters. We're going to be here for the voters. We're going to do our job according to our state laws and the applicable federal laws. So good question. You're fantastic. So we are still figuring out what we're going to do. It may be more drop boxes. It may be bigger drop boxes. We may have to supersize those things. We may have to put a lot more in. That's going to come with more cost. We'll probably have to look at adding security. But at this point, right now, we're waiting for the lawsuits. There's one in Boston that several states have joined in on. And then the second part of this is we're waiting for the U.S. Supreme Court to issue their decision on, I think it's Watson, which is do ballots have to be back in the hands of election officials by election night. So we have several different things hitting us, and we are waiting to see what the final word is prior to the general election. None of this applies to the primary. None of it. This will only be for the general. So, and I think I have probably gone over by a few minutes. I'm so sorry. One more, and then I'll pass the mic off.
The one question that I have is we are watching, especially for the NAACP, we're watching a lot of the injustices that are going on in the other states when it comes to the redistricting and to voters. And while we don't have that here in Washington, we do have a lot of people who have either voter intimidation or they feel as though that mailing in is just, it doesn't work. It's going to get lost in the mail. They just have a lot of different conspiracies when it comes to voting. How can we reassure our members that the importance of voting, but two, that it is safe, it is effective, and your vote is going to be counted. Because a lot of times people just give up because they don't trust the process. And we've seen time and time, especially in the Black community, where there's always been barriers for our votes to count.
So talking about intimidation and barriers, I have read all the books by Ayn Rand. And if any of you have tried that, little short me at 5'2", all of a sudden I'm about 5'7" if I try, stand on her books. The only book I've not been able to finish is a book called Deliver the Vote. That chronicles the history of intimidation, discrimination, barriers, and outright murder that has occurred in this country since before we were actually the United States of America. If you can stomach it, I highly recommend it. I made it to page 70, and I was so sick I absolutely could not finish the book all the way. I think it's about 250 pages. So I would recommend that book. And if nothing else, it makes it clear to everyone that this is a fight that's been going on for a very long time, and it's our responsibility to continue that fight on for the next generations. Because there's still gonna be a fight in the generations to come, but we can't let it lapse. So that's one thing. 2, you have the right to vote. If you meet the criteria to register, mark that ballot, find a way to get it in, put it in the drop boxes. That's the safest thing to do. Put it in those drop boxes. If it gets in those drop boxes, we are going to count it. Your choice is going to be in there, and it's going to be part of the results. And you can watch that on votewa.gov. And that could be the way to get people to realize that it really does happen. Not just that your vote matters, that your vote counts, but that your vote is counted. Take them to votewa.gov, walk them through. They'll see we mailed it to them, provided we still get to do that. But we will make your ballot available to you, that we got it back, that we've checked your signature, and that we've sent it off to tabulation if your signature matched. So they can actually participate through the process. And if they really want to see how it works, Linnell can tell you, come down and observe. Come watch the process. It's just boring. But that's what we want. Poor Elliot, I mean, he's got calluses on his tush from how much he's observed. Where we can make it happen. It's going to be difficult, but we can make it happen. And because we have a vibrant and supportive Secretary of State in this state, they are making funds available also. So we will make it happen. One last question, then I really better turn it over to Linnell.
I was just gonna add, the observation of the process is amazing. It is boring.
Okay, I'm going to give you a mic. Go for that one.
Observing the election or the balloting, what's it called? To be an observer, you go through some training, you understand their process, you get to see people verifying on the computers. I mean, you can watch them verify the signatures, and you can watch them say, needs another level of verification. I mean, you can watch the whole thing. So to me, that'd be an awesome civics lesson for like the youth counselor. I mean, to get younger people, most people have my color hair that are there, but it's fascinating.
Fascinating boredom. I love that.
Now we're handing the mic to Linnell and not back to me. So.
No, but I was hoping that because one of the questions was how can we be more engaged, and the observer process is absolutely. She's like this sergeant major is like, nope, no food, nope, you can't talk to them. Nope. I mean, this is probably one of the most sanitized processes. I wish you were my doctor. I mean, I know I would be safe because, but truly, if you had any question about is this process safe and is vote by mail a credible source, I hope that this has satisfied some of your curiosity about that, because I think that you've really, the proof is in the pudding, and you've done a really fine job, I think, of making sure that our vote is safe and accurate. And somebody said, well, I have a family member who says, well, I don't vote because it doesn't make any difference. Why, if it doesn't make any difference, are people making it so hard to vote? Why are they moving drop boxes? Why are they checking names? Why are they, can I say, messing around in this room? Why are they messing around with us if the vote isn't important? I mean, it's something worth thinking about. I'm going to, I always think it's funny when I say I'm going to pass out. Someone's going to pass out and distribute a League of Women Voters pamphlet here. It's called the Try. They Represent You. And what's cool about it is it has the elected officials of all of the local jurisdictions, which is what we fancy League of Women Voters people call cities and counties and states. And then if you open it up, you can be winning first prize in what district am I in? You're in a lot of districts. You're in a commissioner's district, you're in a library district, you're in a school district, you're in a state district, and these are the districts for the state representative. You have 2 representatives and you have 1 senator, and lots of them are up this primary and fall election. Do not ignore the primary. That's where the big sort is. That's the, the sorting room, because that's where you have the broadest representation of ideas. And even if your candidate doesn't win, the point is that they can bring up ideas that are important to the public. And so I really encourage you to be engaged with the primary.
Well, I tell you what, if you don't mind, whoops.
Do you want to go to the fainting couch?
Yes. So I hope you don't mind, but I got a text this afternoon that said my grandniece, my 13-year-old grandniece, is playing volleyball at West Valley. They're from Priest River. It's as close to what I get as grandchildren. So I hope you don't mind if I run off early, because I don't get to spend much time with my family. So this is a rare event for me. But thank you all. Stay involved, stay concerned.
She's going to change into shorts. It'll be fine. I'm also distributing to you, I'm having distributed to you a little handout. This is the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And if you have not read it, it's a 6-pager, and it includes the list of grievances. Why did we do this? Why did we create this kind of government for ourselves? Because everybody else sort of inherited a king, or everybody else did something different. But this is where we have to figure it out. Democracy is not an efficiency model. It's an education model. It's like, yeah, we're going to talk a long time and we'll come up with some really great ideas about how we want to govern ourselves. Where do we want those drop boxes? So I have put, actually, Elaine Harger put the list of when different people were eligible to vote, which has been hotly contested throughout our history. And then some quotes that I think are really quite fine. I was interested in one of the first recognitions of voting was with the Lewis and Clark group when they were trying to decide if they were going to carry on or just go back. And what was interesting was that there was an enslaved man named York, whom you may know about and have read about. He was there along with Sakakawea. Yes, that's really how she says her name, because I went to Lewis and Clark College. Okay, TMI. But what's important was everybody in that group voiced their opinion about whether to go or not. So it wasn't just Meriwether Lewis and what's his name, Clark, saying, okay, we're going to do it. It was everybody had dialogue to do that. And then, of course, some people think that we got the idea of democracy from the Greeks and the Romans, but really and truly, it was the tribes up in what is now Upper New York that were sharing their information, because there was a lot of communication between the local tribes and the people who live there. So the model that they used was a democracy model. And then, of course, a lovely quote from Abigail Adams. I included the entire quote, and no offense, gentlemen, but I thought it was important. So that's from the League of Women Voters for our 250th. I have been working for a couple of years. One of the things, how does the league work? You know, y'all are older than the league. You're 9 years older than we are. Do you know that? The NAACP, because we're 1920, which was when the 19th Amendment was ratified by one vote. So does one vote matter? Yeah, one vote matters. So, so we have a process that we go through that is laborious, according to some people, but we don't support candidates. We don't oppose candidates. We think that candidates are interesting, but political parties are sometimes problematic. He's trying to tell me something. Okay, I'm going to talk really fast. Do you love this man? I do. Anyway, what I'm trying to communicate here is that we go through a process of study, and then we come to a consensus with our in Spokane, 160 members. In the 20 leagues throughout the state of Washington, there's about 3,000. And we talk until we come up with, this is what we believe should be done related to voting. This is what we believe should be done related to the Snake River dams, whatever it is that our people are interested in. But the point is, this dialogue process brings us to being able to say, vote yes on this, vote no on that particular issue. So there's two parts to the league. The part that's education, which is you should vote, and the part that says, you know, this initiative, it is really bad. So sometimes we confuse people about that, but we never, we have found that political parties are just really not an effective way to move forward, because the political parties keep changing their mind about things. But the league, boy, we're straight from the beginning. That's what I have for you. And an invitation to join the league. I'm going to pass out again. And I am happy to hang out and answer any questions later. Thanks for the hook.
Thank you, Ms. Lunelwe. We appreciate your time and your dedication coming here tonight and sharing with us. I'm going to turn it over to one of my favorites, Pastor Rick Matters, to introduce our special guest.
Thank you, one of my favorites. Just very briefly, because time is important here, it's a privilege to introduce Jack Archer, who prefers they, them. And Jack has many stories, many gifts, and that would enlighten us and educate us and inspire us. But there's one for tonight, and Jack will be the storyteller.
Thanks, Rick. I didn't fully know what to expect out of this evening, so I'm going to give a little bit of a summary about where things are, and then I'm going to open up to folks to ask questions about stuff. I'll start off by saying, if you're completely unfamiliar with me or why I might be here, again, my name is Jack Archer. I use they, them pronouns, and I am one of what is known as the Spokane 3. Which is weird to be in a number. Like, no one expects to be like one of the people in the 3 or the 7 or the whatever. Because my case is very much still ongoing, despite the fact that there is at least one verdict, I'm not gonna get into any details of the case that are not on the public record. That's bad for me and bad for my co-defendants, but I do wanna talk about things that are on the record, and I wanna also talk about what I feel like those things mean in terms of, well, our community in general. I really loved what Linnell said about how if voting doesn't count, why are they trying so hard to stop you from doing it? I think that's a fantastic sentiment to remember, a fantastic phrase, because we can say that about a lot of things that people say are useless. Whether it be getting involved with, your local government and showing up to public meetings, or protesting, or speaking out generally in your community. A lot of people will say, well, it doesn't matter, rich people do what they want to do, whatever. But the fact is, if it didn't matter, then I'm not sure why a bunch of cops beat us up over it. So with that in mind, I'll just give the quick overall summary to get us all on the same page. On June 11, former City Council President Ben Stuckert posted that he'd become the legal guardian of a young man who he was, what's the word? Thank you. Well, actually, the word I'm trying to look for was when you go with some accompanying to an ICE check-in, right? And this is common. Like, if you are in our immigration system somewhere, you sometimes just have to go to the ICE office and they ask you questions and you do stuff. This young man was detained, and despite all of Ben's greatest efforts and things that came out in the trial, like the fact that he called the mayor a bunch of times and he called the attorney general a bunch of times, and he was doing everything to figure out what was going on with this. Despite all of that, he was not able to get this guy out. And so he went to Facebook and he said, this is happening and I'm gonna sit in the front of the bus and you're welcome to join me if you want. And I was one of the people who read that post. And I didn't necessarily know what I was going to do in response to that. I knew I was gonna show up. I didn't know if I was ready to sit in front of a bus, but I knew I was going to show up. And I did, and so did about 1,000 other Spokaneites, which, real quick, we need to give ourselves credit here in Spokane. Yeah, literally, 1,000 people from a Facebook post. No pre-planning, no flyers handed out, nothing. Just 1,000 people who saw that something unjust was happening and decided to go be there and attempt to do something about it. I think that speaks highly of our city, and I'm really proud of that fact. Ultimately, there were lots of different things that, the press got huge, lots of things happened, but relevant to my story is that I, with some other people, locked arms and stood in front of a gate to the secure parking lot that ICE was using and attempting to leave from. We didn't engage in any offensive action. We stood there literally with our arms locked because I was the person who had the most activism experience in that group. I kind of took the lead on figuring out what our tactic was going to be. And one of the reasons why we decided to lock arms is because if you're going to engage in some kind of civil disobedience, the hardest thing to not do is not retaliate, not hit back. In MLK's day, they had a whole weeks long sometimes, classes in civil disobedience to make sure that everybody had the requisite discipline to be in that space without escalating it in ways that were not in line with their commitment to civil disobedience. We didn't have that. But you know what you can't do when your arms are like this? You can't hit back. So that's what we agreed to do. That was our on-the-fly decision, and we did that. There are plenty of videos online of us getting roughed up by the ICE agents that eventually did come out, until eventually we kept bouncing back up. Like those little, one of the things we said was we're gonna be weebles, be a weeble. Anyone know what I'm talking about? Thank you. Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. That was our whole plan. I mean, we did fall a few times, so we got back up. And eventually, they were forced to close the gate to loud chants of the word shame from the surrounding crowd. And they went back into their area, and that was that. And honestly, it was a really triumphant moment. Without throwing a single punch, without doing anything aggressive, we had caused them, we made them go back up, and close the gate behind them. I ended up staying at that protest. I arrived around 2. I didn't leave until about 12:30 a.m. when the last of the people that I had been sort of spending time with at the time had gotten a safe ride home. Because one of the things you learn if you ever do any community organizing is that no one leaves a protest by themselves. You do not do that, especially if you know there's going to be heat. Now, if we're talking yearly rally, whether it be the MLK March or Pride or something like that, yeah, people come and they go. But if you're talking something that has any kind of heat to it, or if you know they're counter-protesters, or even if this is just a new issue and you don't know how the community is going to react, you do not leave alone. So once everyone was in an Uber or in their car or on a bus or something, then I went home, and that was that, I thought. That was June 11. About a month later, on July 15, myself and 8 other people, and the group originally known as the Spokane 9, we were all arrested and arraigned on charges of, and I'm gonna see if I can get this right now, conspiracy to impede or injure officers of the United States in the lawful discharge of their duties by use of force, threat, or intimidation. All of that essentially based on what I did at the Southgate with a lot of other people. And actions I'm so proud of today, honestly. As you know, time whittled on. A lot of people took plea deals and such. I also want to throw out here, there are people who will be like, why do people plea? Why would they do that if they weren't guilty? Y'all, the legal system will wring you out. It will wring you out. And I have no doubt that the people who decided to plead out did so because that was in their best interest, their mental health, their physical health, their families, their responsibilities. There are people who simply could not afford to take this to trial. I, however, am honestly a pretty lucky and blessed person. I had both the stubbornness, enough systems knowledge to not feel like I was flying blind. For reference, I just graduated from Gonzaga University School of Law in May. Thank you. So I graduated May 9, and then I was in a courtroom by May 18. But what that gave me was it gave me enough knowledge to frankly feel emotionally secure enough to even face this process. I think that I don't take that for granted at all. I also had resources, not independently wealthy or anything, but enough people in this community wanted to support me and care for me enough that I was able to get good representation and thus pursue this. And so for all those reasons, I am lucky. And so the 3 of us who went to trial in many ways were lucky. We represented the privileged few of the 9 of us who could take this all the way to trial. And so we did. And on May 28, all 3 of us, myself, Justice for All, and Bajan Mavawala, were found guilty. Not what we expected. One second, I need to get some water. My mouth is very dry. This was not, pardon me, this was not the outcome we expected. I'm gonna give one other caveat, which is a lot of people will be like, oh, how could the jury have done this? And how could people have done that? And blah, blah, blah. My spouses included, my guys, for them, it's very personal. They hate every member of the jury with a fiery passion. I mean, the kind that you hate when they've convicted your partner, the kind of hate might be a strong word, but there's a lot of hurt, I should say. And I think maybe I'm lucky in that it's just my disposition that I actually don't have to carry that hurt, not only because my partners are carrying it kind of on my behalf, but because what a lot of people don't realize is that juries don't just get to say whatever they want to say. They don't just get to look at everything and go, oh, okay, I guess I don't think I saw everything, I don't think they're guilty, or I saw everything and I think they are guilty. They get a sheet, they get instructions, long instructions that they're meant to follow. And then they get basically a worksheet that says, say yes or no. Is this true? Is that true? Is this true? And it adds up to a formula that then leads them to guilty or not guilty. Sometimes that formula is very short because the questions that the jury is meant to answer are, did this person take that person's car without permission? Yes, car theft, guilty, done. Other times, it's much more complicated. And that's what I believe we have going on here. There are questions and concerns that touch on the First Amendment. There are questions and concerns that touch on, to be specific about that, freedom of speech and freedom of assembly and freedom of association. There were questions involving how policy was handled, and so much was decided before the jury was even in the room. What they don't tell you about is the pretrial. The pretrial is the hour before the jury is brought in every day, when the lawyers argue with each other about what they can know, what they can't know, what evidence can get in, what can't get in, what words people are not allowed to use or use. All of that happens in pretrial. And then the jury is brought in after there's been some filtering and some haggling, and then they hear that and go from there. And so I don't think, I still remember, and I don't think it matters if I say this, looking at the jury when they came in and seeing that there were definitely members of that jury who seemed visibly upset. I'm not convinced they all wanted to find us guilty, but it was their understanding that they were compelled to do so by the instructions they were given. So then there's the what comes next. And then after the sort of what comes next, then I want to hopefully just converse with everyone here. I don't know how much time we have, but okay, cool. So apparently, I actually had to dispel this today. A lot of people think I'm already in jail or in prison. I discovered this when I sent a message to a group text, and the first reply was, "We thought you were already in prison." I was asking them about what we're going to do for Juneteenth, and they didn't think I was going to be around for it. But what that just reflects is that people aren't aware of what's happening. And so that's why I'm excited to speak here, and also why I'm going to be speaking a little bit, not just verbally, but writing more, because that's the best way for me to communicate. I'm a writer at heart, about what's happening. Because it's not as simple as person found guilty and then let off to prison. First, you have to have a sentencing. Now, that sentencing is scheduled by the judge, usually for a week or two out, somewhere in there, or the next day, depending on what the court's load is like, who knows. But that sentencing is predicated on the assumption that the conviction is going to stand. But there are still things between verdict and sentencing that can disrupt that. So a couple of things that might happen, you might have one of the side's defendants file what's called a Rule 29. And that refers to the 29th Rule of Federal Procedure that I focused on civil in law school. I wasn't expecting this, so I can't give you more than that. But in the 29th Rule of Federal Procedure essentially allows attorneys to file a motion that says, hey, judge, I know that there was a whole trial and the jury said guilty, but legally speaking, this is nonsense. Please throw this out. Please give us not guilty regardless of the verdict. And the distinction for that is because, going back to the story about the car thief, the jury is meant to answer questions, what they call, I'm going to give you a small class here, questions of fact, right? Questions of fact. Did that person take that other person's car without their consent? Facts. If so, legal conclusion, car theft. But if it's not that clean, if you're not being charged of just a car theft, but you're being charged with a conspiracy to injure or impede officers in the lawful discharge of their duties using force, threats, or intimidation, there's a lot of facts. Was there force, threats, or intimidation, and officers of the United States, and what does that mean, and all these other things. You got to go through line by line by line by line. And sometimes there's some argument about what is a question of fact and what is a question of law. Questions of law belong to the judge, and only the judge. So the judge can say, look, I know what the jury said. They answered all these factual questions, but legally speaking, the way this should legally function, nah. So we're just gonna, that's what a Rule 29 motion asks the judge to do. So that's one thing. There are other motions as well. That's the most popular one. If you're interested, I'll let you Google Rule 33. There's a bunch of different types of motions. I shouldn't say a bunch. There's like a couple of motions that could really upend things between verdict and sentencing. So in my particular case, in the case of me and my co-defendants, we're pursuing some of those options. We're pursuing some of those other motions, and the deadline to even just turn in those motions to the judge, we'll then read them and then get a reply, and then we'll get to rebut that with a response. The beginning of this whole written legal debate doesn't start until July 10. So I may not be in court again to figure out the fate of this situation until early or mid-August, for all I know. Because then after that, after all of the memos have flown back and forth, there's going to be another hearing. And that hearing is when the judge is going to say, look, I read all your arguments and I got these questions before I can rule. And then after that, she might take another 5 weeks to rule and write out her written ruling and have that be published. So it is a long timeline. That is essentially where we are now, just to sort of orient people to things. I want to share sort of a couple of things that I really want people to remember, and then I'll hush up for a bit and hear from y'all. The first thing is that this is, in some ways, exactly what we expect and not at all what we expect. I say this for a couple of reasons. A lot of folks, frankly, especially Black folks, I think very recently are like, yep, this is how the system works. This is what they do. And that's true to a degree. There is, our justice system, quote unquote, does not function in a racially equitable way. All three of us as defendants are people of color. 2 of the 3 of us are trans. I'm still trans. There's quite a bit of, there are many reasons to not have faith in the system. And the way the law was applied in this sense, the argument that the government is making, novel, completely novel, has not been done before. We're the only case of our kind that I'm aware of to this point to go to trial. How many of y'all have heard of the Broadview 6? Okay, I got 2 hands from the people I'd expect to have those hands from. The Broadview 6 are basically people who are in the exact same position as we were in, I want to say Broadview is outside of Chicago, in Illinois, right? Their case never went to trial because the judge said, hey, government, your argument is nonsense. Dismissed. And that didn't just happen with the Broadview 6, that's actually happened multiple times. You want to say that on the mic? You want to say that on the mic?
18 out of 36 times.
Yeah, that's a perfect half, isn't it? Yeah, perfect half that didn't go to trial. And if I'm not mistaken, I think ours is the first case to end with a guilty verdict. I could be wrong about that, but
The only exception is some during the Bundy trials, there was some small Bundys that got charged.
yeah, it's worth noting. I mean, if you don't know who the Bundys are, you know what? If you look up Clive and Bundy, you might be fascinated to learn that that is actually the closest comparison to my case. Believe it or not, legally speaking, we're talking about armed white ranchers refusing to remove their cows from BLM land and picking up sniper positions against the government. That's who we're legally comparable to. Wild. But yeah, generally speaking, this charge is strange. This approach, this use of this charge is novel. It's not ordinary. So this is not how the system always functions. This is not just your day in, day out injustice against, marginalized folks. This is an escalation of things. And it's important that we recognize that because for 2 reasons. One is that I feel like people will look at this case, especially people who know me, and say, well, if you can get convicted, then the whole system's nonsense, bye. And they're not going to even consider what it means to resist, because how do you resist something like that? But the fact is, this is very much an escalation. This is a test. This is a battle. So now is the moment to lean in and fight this. And thankfully, I have a great legal team that is fighting for me. What it means, though, for other people is that those of us who are really concerned with if we're concerned with our rights in this country, if we're concerned with our ability to dissent against government action, if we're concerned with our friends and neighbors, regardless of their immigration status, if we're concerned with the government actually keeping the promises that it makes to people who it invites to this country, or makes to people who engage with our legal system, we need to keep speaking up. We do need to keep protesting, and we do need to keep being loud. And sort of my last note on this is in terms of protesting, second to last one. A lot of people will tell me, I can't afford to protest. I can't be out there doing this, that, and the other. It's too dangerous. It's too this, that, and the other. And that is a valid position. I have a policy generally speaking, that I have never once looked a Black person in the face and said, I need you to be on the front line. White folks, y'all can get the smoke, genuinely. Because like, there is a privilege differential. There is a privilege differential. And if you are, especially if you are a decently economically resourced white person, you should consider what it would mean for you to be on the front line of a protest. But besides that, to all of my people who I say, listen, you don't gotta do all that, there are other things to do. Protesting is not a one and done, and it's not a strategy, it's a tactic. Protesting is a tactic as part of a larger strategy, and that larger strategy needs lots of different things done. I'm gonna throw off a list of things that people did while we were there that, as far as I know, are not chargeable at that protest, that a lot of people who could not be there on the front lines did. This was the anniversary that's just passed, so this was June 11. It's a hot day. People brought cases of water and dropped them off. People moved other people's cars so they wouldn't get impounded. There are people who said, look, if somebody needs me to, I'm available to watch kids and parents at the protest. People ordered food and had it delivered to us. People brought snacks, brought oranges, so that as we were drinking all that water, we didn't run out of electrolytes and such. People brought umbrellas for shade. People helped send messages to loved ones for us. People took videos and observed the situation, bore witness to what was happening, so it couldn't just be spun into a completely different narrative. Never mind that they did try. The fact is, those videos are still there. We can still access the truth. People did all kinds of things. People showed up and didn't join the front line, but they were present and available for the kinds of needs that protesters generally have. And those are just the things you can do on site. There's a whole host of other things you can do off site, and I could teach a whole workshop on that, and I'm gonna resist the urge. But I mean, the best way to find out is to talk to your leaders in organizing. You already know some, because you're in this room. So asking those people what strategy is being pursued and what is needed right now, what kind of support, emotional, material, financial, could be of use. There is a place for everyone in this work. So then the very last thing I'm gonna say is that, and I'm gonna actually see if I can pull it out of my notebook, if I brought it up with me, I didn't. So a few days ago, I had a chance to speak to a different group of people. Actually, I'll just name them. The Washington Institute for a Democratic Future had their graduation last weekend, and I was from the class of 2018, so they brought me back to be present at the graduation. And I made a speech there, and there's one bit that I really want to make sure that I deliver as well now as I did then. The thing is that the narrative, all of the craziness, what they're doing is explicitly to chill dissent, right? They want to make people too afraid to speak out against the government, but more insidiously, they're also doing this to support a narrative of reasonably matched sides, right? And they do that for two reasons. Not only does their whole narrative depend on evenly matched sides. Their argument doesn't make sense the way that they treated us unless we are somehow a frightening army of people. They got to find a way to level that playing field. They're also doing it to obscure the moral stain of their violence by pretending that there is no moral high ground at all. I'm a big believer in nonviolence. I know not everybody's on that train, but one thing I will say again is that this is a philosophy and not a mere tactic. Everything that I just described earlier, bringing food, bringing water, watching kids, moving cars, contacting loved ones, taking videos, those are all acts of nonviolence that I would argue are types of resistance. They want to confuse the ill-informed. If you can both sides things, then anyone who doesn't have the time, energy, or access to good information, or desire to access good information, can just be like, oh, well, I guess it's all neutral. It all comes out in the wash. They're wrong and they're wrong. Or maybe they both have a point. Who knows? But more importantly, they want to demoralize the dedicated. If people can be convinced, and I mean this particularly with regard to nonviolent action, if people can be convinced, look, there's no point in doing this because look, I saw all these people get arrested and look, it doesn't matter how innocent you are or how good you were or whatever, you're still gonna get run over by the system, forget it, then they're winning because they've convinced you that there's no point in trying because consequences will still follow. And thus, you're gonna be demoralized and you're either going to take a path of violence or take a path of apathy. That is the point. That is why they do that. That is why they want to chill things. That is why they want to confuse what happened. And the thing I want to tell the people like that is those consequences were always coming. Always. When people, and listen, I'm not saying it's the same thing, but when, you know, our movement forebearers were sitting at lunch counters and whatnot, their commitment wasn't just to sit there as long as no one got coffee poured on them. Their commitment was not to sit there as long as nobody got arrested. Their commitment was not to sit there as long as nobody got beat up or arrested or hurt in some way. No, the consequences were always coming. It's what happens after that that determines whether we win or lose. So don't allow, and I say this to people because I feel like it can be very demoralizing to look at someone. I remember looking at my co-defendant, Bajan Mavawala. He did exactly one thing. He stood on the line, linked arms, that was it. He didn't know anybody there. He wasn't a part of, I met him at arraignment. And yet somehow he's still found guilty of conspiracy. That's demoralizing. That could be demoralizing. Except that when you take a stand, the consequences are always coming. So we can't let them win. We can't, I don't suspect anybody here is looking to take a path of violence, but we can't take a path of apathy or helplessness either. So that's the end of that. I want to know what y'all want to know.
I just want to give an example from today's news that the legislation in Georgia was going to gerrymander and take away the one black vote. They decided not to because there was so much anger, and the anger stopped them from the oppression.
Questions for Jack? Questions?
So you said there's another, you said there was another court hearing or whatever that was exactly like yours. What is the difference? Like,
Spokane, Chicago. Genuinely.
and you that's it?
Do we have one more mic?
We'll just let, if you all shout and then we
Yeah.
can just
Sorry, because I'm
repeat the question.
So for the sake of people online, you're asking what's the difference between us and the Broadview Six. I'll be real with you. I don't know the ins and outs of that whole case. I've been tracking cases based on their legal similarity, not necessarily their factual similarity. Call it a habit I've been forced into over the last 3 years, but legally, but it's worth noting a couple of things that can be instructive. One is that Spokane is a test market for nonsense. It has always been a test market for nonsense. Now, before, when I would say that, I was usually talking about I was usually talking about white supremacist movement. You know, they kind of test run their propaganda out here and whatnot. But the fact is, we're a test market for anyone who wants to see if they can make it work in a majority white space. And that's a lot of people, including apparently the federal government. So the biggest differences, at least that I can see, and I invite you to do your own reading. If you just Google Broadview 6, I promise it'll all pop up for you. But the differences that I'm currently at least aware of are the fact that it was just a different place. You're in Chicago. You got a jury pool that looks very different from a jury pool here. And you've got defendants who don't look like the defendants here. That's what I know. And ultimately, actually, the next thing is that you have a federal judge who decided that this was not something worthy of their courtroom. That was the decision made in that case. And that's happened a few times across the country. I believe, Hadley, you mentioned the 18 out of 36. You were talking 36 times this charge has been made, right? Charges against protesters during the Trump administration that didn't make it to trial. Okay, 18 out of 36. The specific charges, though, that we've got, because protesters are being charged with different things. The conspiracy charges that we got are, from what I understand, this was a new approach, and the idea was to see, will this stick? Yes. No, it's exactly as crazy as it sounds. Like, I would love to be able to somehow like square this circle for you and like make it make sense. It doesn't. It doesn't. I mean, there's a lot of things that were thrown in to muddy the waters. They charged originally 9 of us, but there was a protest of over 1,000 people. Yeah, some of those 1,000 people got up to some nonsense. You know, there was the conversation about like what defines a conspiracy, and is it enough that people knew each other or not knew each other? Apparently not. Apparently I can be in a conspiracy with someone I didn't even know existed, and without ever communicating with them from beginning to end, or even being connected to them by any obvious means. It's a little bit confusing in that there are legal ways in which this could make sense, in my personal opinion. And granted, I've not sat for the bar, I'm not a lawyer, but in my personal opinion, this does not make legal sense. This case does not make legal sense. So asking if my college helped me in any way. So I will say this, the GU law community was very supportive. There wasn't a whole lot that they could do, right? Like I had counsel, I was going to court, you know, that just is what it is. But I got a lot of well wishes, messages. Somebody circulated a sign asking for justice in the situation, and got a bunch of my classmates signed it. There was a lot of support. You know, my friends there, of course, called me, checked in on me. So, and my professors regularly asked me how I was doing. So I was very supported throughout the process by GU Law. Yeah.
This might be a rabbit hole, but when you were talking about pretrial and the checklist the jurors have to go through, there's always this beyond a reasonable doubt piece. And when you just answered the question, there was this interpretation thing that came into my head, because linking arms is a nonviolent act, but yet it was interpreted as an act of conspiracy or something. At what point, when you say facts and the law, where does interpretation and flawed interpretation fall into that?
I mean, I wish I had a good answer. It falls everywhere where flawed human reasoning and perception exists. You know, in this particular case, they're not asked whether or not they believe beyond a reasonable doubt, at least my understanding of how this works. They aren't asked, do you believe beyond a reasonable doubt that these people used violence to da-da-da-da? What they're asked is, can you find beyond a reasonable doubt A? Can you find beyond a reasonable doubt B? Can you find beyond a reasonable doubt C? By the time you get to the end of that, the guilty or not guilty has been determined by that work. So their doubts don't relate to the conclusion. They relate to the steps taken to get to that conclusion. Because again, juries aren't supposed to be interpreting the law at all, only facts. So they say what facts they believe happened. And if the judge or the prosecution tells them, okay, well, if these facts happen, then legally that means blah over here. That just is what it is. Okay, I see 1, 2, 3. I'm also gonna run and grab my chapstick real quick.
Who makes the decision tree?
That is an excellent question. I just realized my chapstick's in the back of the room. That decision tree is something that is essentially actively haggled over in pretrial by the attorneys in that hour before court, day after day, and ultimately the judge.
So my question is similar. I'm thinking, is there a basis for appeal based on what was determined in the pretrial meetings? Because that seems like that's where the determinations really affected what the jurors could look at. And it seems like some of those things must have been stated somewhat, maybe unlawfully, I'm not sure, certainly oddly.
I'm going to give you the blandest answer ever, which is that anything that was an issue at trial can theoretically be raised on appeal. I'm unfortunately leave it at that.
Just as an outside observer, my non-legal perception was that the prosecutors tended towards bullying and obfuscation, making it sound something that it wasn't.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry, I saw you earlier. My bad.
Just real quick, you said that there's going to be the back and forth memos and then there's going to be another gathering. It's a hearing. Is that public?
To my knowledge, yes. I might throw out a couple things if that's all right. Yeah. All right. I see that we're at time, so I'm trying to keep this short. Two things, just on as far as this case is particularly concerned. If you're not familiar with things, don't take my word for it. Like Google Spokane 9, or better yet, I mean, my personal favorite coverage was Range Media. They were the absolutely most comprehensive. One of the reporters even live tweeted the entire trial. And they've got a lot of information as well as legal explainers and other things for people. So I think they're great. I would check them out in terms of breadth. Of course, this is also covered by other local media. So, you know, choose your pick. There's probably something from whatever local media you prefer. I would also say that if you're really wondering what's going on, or if you're curious, you have the stomach for it, and you feel like this would be of value to you, do, with caution, do look at the videos. See for yourself what happened. See for yourself what was seen in court. More important than all that, though, I want to make sure that people don't forget why any of this happened. All right, we went to that place because two young men, Cesar and Josuar, who were invited, frankly, to come to the United States from Venezuela to seek asylum, were illegally detained. And that's not just my opinion, that's Federal Judge Robart's opinion up over on the west side. Illegally detained and trafficked to a detention facility in Tacoma that is known for its human rights abuses, actually known to be one of, like, it's a particularly bad facility, okay? That is why any of this happened. So regardless of what's happening with me, that issue, that hasn't gone away. One of those young men, he's not a boy, is back home, Josuar. And by home, I mean here in Spokane. The other one chose to self-deport because he didn't want to stay in that facility any longer. Self-deport. It's a really polite way of saying your life was so miserable, you just decided, fine, whatever, I'll go back to the place I was fleeing. That situation is in some ways resolved, but there are still thousands of immigrants in this community and millions of immigrants in our country who are dealing with the government that does not keep its promises to them, and that actively seeks to do them harm, frankly. So I want to make sure that people don't forget that and recognize that this is, of course, this is a moment of solidarity. This is like that there's this chant that's like, if they come for one, they come for all. Heard that? They're well past one, y'all. They're so far past one. And there are Haitians and African immigrants and Latino immigrants and Asian immigrants. Incidentally, I don't know this for certain, but I've heard that the white immigrant community has gotten some, but relatively less heat because they're not as easily identifiable. But who are all in this, who are in this situation, and we owe it to them to not buy the nonsense narrative, to look past the weird distortions of law, to refuse to be demoralized and refuse to be cowed and continue to fight this, because it's not what happens now, it's what happens next that determines if we win.
I'm going to add to that. It's not what happens to that we owe it to them. We owe it to ourselves as well. Thank you. And I want to say to you, you are brave, you are resilient, and we thank you for what you've done. I was in the overflow when the verdict came, and could have sucked the air right out the room. It was, I can't even, you can imagine. But what I will say is that I'm thankful to Hadley for being our kind of our own range media here for NAACP, of coming and sharing with the group what was going on and updates and making the call out. And we encourage people to go down and support you all in this journey, because it is a certain journey, and it impacts, to your point, we're going to the original reason why they were all here. And the violation, we're constantly fighting for what? Civil rights. It's human rights. And it has not stopped. We're in 2026. We're celebrating, what, 250 years of this country, and we still have to fight for our basic civil and human rights. And I want, and I love what you said about the differential, because we have our allies here that can do a lot more and can be out there than your friends of color can do. Because at the end of the day, to your point, they're going after people who are brown skin, that have melanin. They can snatch them up. And then they can tweak the laws. Why? Because we're the different. Thank you all for showing up. Thank you to those who are online for tuning in. I want to encourage you all to, if you have it, the means to share this video link with others, because what was said today was very important, not only on the auditor and voting side, but also on the process and what's going on the Spokane 3 side. So please share this information that you learned here today. And thank you for coming to our NAACP meeting. Yes. Oh yeah, sure, go ahead.
Jack may not share this on their own behalf, but I will share this as a proud supporter of the Spokane 3, that there are GoFundMes out for each of the 3 supporters. It's my dream world that each of the 3 people really just get to focus on like being with families and like recovering and hopefully not thinking too much about this horrible, stressful thing that's ahead of you. So we can do that by creating some breathing room with financial support if you are so able. I'll see if we can get those maybe posted on the Facebook and sent out, and you can come find me if you need links to those.
And then April has one more thing.
The Education Committee supported this tonight. This is a draft. Knowledge is power. There's only 9. But what Jack has described is a broader issue in our country. And a lot of times I've learned stuff about the law that I had no idea about just by following. Like, I didn't realize a jury of your peers doesn't guarantee racial balance. But I attempted an FAQ, and it's really about themes from the case. It's good. Thank you. I was hoping so. I'm not a law student, but sometimes I think I am. But if you want this, there will be an electronic copy. There are 9 copies. And if you have further questions or other things, please submit them to myself or Eddie, because I want to keep this as an ongoing publication, because a lot of times we don't understand how the law works. We don't understand things. Like even with voting, right? I mean, the signature thing, right? And so please educate yourself on the language of the law, the Constitution, because I'm big on this interpretation thing, because it's really making me mad. And who gets to interpret the law and put people away. So, yeah.
Thank you all. I do have to say this. You do not have to go home, but you have to get out of this room, because we have to lock up. We got to be out of here at 8 o'clock. It's after 8 o'clock.